This is Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are in Sacramento today, and guess who's here? Rocky Chavez. He is a member of the California State Assembly representing beautiful San Diego, California. And I want to speak with you about what we know as the Cap and Trade program, whereby we are looking to decrease carbon emissions, and that is done not through strict limits on emissions, but the ability of companies to trade the right to emit certain amounts of emissions. There's no question that the program continues to gain supporters and critics. You're taking an interesting, measured approach. Let's talk about that.
Sure. As I started off saying, is recognizing that there is such thing as global warming, which, as you know, Republicans have taken a position that's not there.
Right. Well, can I ask you about that? Because you are a Republican.
Yes.
And it's fair to say, and you said it, that members of your party, especially coming out of Washington, D.C., have been skeptical about global warming, and that's generous, despite the fact, as you would say, I think 97%, 9% of scientists say this is a real event caused at least in part by man.
That's right. And so I recognize it a problem. And as you know, to reduce carbon output, there's a number of plans that people have put together. There's one that talks about just capping it and taxing people, finding them if they don't meet their number.
It's a ceiling.
It's a ceiling, but a downward sloping ceiling. So going to the 2030, which could actually, we're trying to get 50% reduction.
Right.
That would be very onerous to jobs. It'd be onerous to the people who are paying gas in their cars.
Sure.
So the market break approach is called cap and trade.
Right.
Where cap and trade says use market forces and use innovation coupled together for our industries to get down and reduce the amount of carbon footprint.
But let me ask you about that, because this is a market-based, free market-favored approach. And when I think about free market approaches, I think about Republicans and their desire to energize the free market. But I think it's fair to say that when we look at cap and trade, it's the Democratic Party that seems to be more keen on it than the Republican Party.
Actually, the cap and trade, the market-based approach, was originally a Republican idea. So
kind of like the Affordable Care Act was, Heritage Foundation, the individual mandate. But be that as it may,
good ideas are good ideas.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so so when I took this on, I said I'm going to support families, working families.
Right.
I'm going to support keeping jobs in California, because the LAO report had a thing, and they're called leakage, and that's just a fancy word to say jobs leaving California. You hear about the businesses going to Texas. And so there needs to be some certainty on where we're trying to go. The rules need to be clean and well developed. And if you talk to the people who actually developed the market to do this out of the Air Resources Board, it was nearly 3 years of hard staff work to say, well, how's this thing going to actually work?
Right.
And who can go in the market? Because as you know, Canada can buy carbon is in the market with us as well as we go into Canada. And so establishing this market was a lot of work.
Right. And let me ask you about this market, because the early auctions of those emission credits sold well. The last 2 or 3 maybe auctions not so well, but very recently there was an auction that did gangbusters. So it's a little, I don't know if we should look at each auction and say, aha, it's working, aha, it's not working, but it's not consistent.
And what is consistent is the reduction of carbon, and the LAO reported that the last few times where the market did not see the same revenue that we've seen in the past was because the slowing of the economy. And so the economy was slowing down and technology was coming in, and so you didn't need to buy so many credits.
Let's talk about revenue, though, because that does seem to be a source of controversy, what to do with the revenue from the auctions. The legislature in the past couple of years has set certain goals and priorities for that revenue. Some of it's going to high-speed rail. Some of it's going to transit, inner-city rail, affordable housing. There's other monies up for grabs. My gut tells me, based on an article that you wrote, by the way, a very effective article from the Times of San Diego, you're looking to kind of simplify where that money goes and kind of avoid what you call spending it on pet projects.
That's exactly right. It's the true pork barrel that everybody gets upset about politicians doing. My plan is to first understand we're doing this to reduce carbon.
Right.
And that if businesses can innovate and go down, that's a great thing. But I believe a significant amount of the money should be going to investment in new technologies. And I think it'd be a great thing to tie in with our university systems because our best and brightest students are there.
Right.
And if we can invest in our universities and develop the next technology so that we can get off fossil fuels. We don't know, if you would have mentioned 30 years ago that we were going to have such a robust energy source from the solar, people would have thought you're crazy. But now you're seeing really the value of it. And so I think there's new technologies are going. In fact, Caltech has one right now where they're using algae to grow in the sun to produce energy in itself. There also needs to be a big investment in retention of energy because solar only works about 22% of the time.
Right.
And so we have this point when we're not using energy, but we have a lot of energy, that's in the daytime. But we can't retain that like a battery.
But I want to
invest in that.
I want to ask you though about investment because in the past administration, the federal administration, we saw a very concerted effort to bolster green energy, we'll call it. The current administration doesn't seem as keen on green energy or these types of carbon cutting programs. We don't know if the current administration will stay in the Paris Accords, for example. But I've spoken with Republicans in California, like you, like Kevin Faulconer, the mayor of San Diego, a Republican, a successful Republican. And I'm wondering if folks like you, like Kevin Faulconer, successful Republicans in California, can speak with our friends in Washington and say, look, we in California are making green energy work. Please don't cut us off at the knees. Because, please.
In fact, I was there 3 weeks ago in Washington, D.C., talking to Republicans on this issue. And highlighting the fact that the Secretary of the Navy and the Department of Defense have invested heavily in alternative energy sources.
Right.
And when I met with them, they noted the presidential direction that came out in Obama to continue the investments and look into other energy sources was never rescinded by President Trump. When he came in and started putting his ice shoes out, they thought that was going to be one of the first ones. It was not taken out. But they're going to continue to invest in alternative energy because it's smart. It's the right thing to do.
You think, though? I mean, maybe this Department of
the Department of Defense, the Department of Navy, that's pretty heavy.
I don't know. I mean, Kevin Faulconer, when I spoke with him, Republican mayor of San Diego, there are concerns about these local climate action plans, whether they will be allowed, I guess, to continue. And I said the same thing to Mr. Faulconer. You're a successful Republican in California. If you're passionate about this, speak to our friends in Washington.
I do. And I talked to my Congressman Ice on it.
Oh, a Republican in a swing district that needs to hear, arguably, these voices.
And it's new jobs. There's more jobs going into green technology than there is in fossil fuels.
Okay.
So it's a good decision for the society in the long term.
Let's talk more about it when you come back, okay?
I will.
His name is Rocky Chavez. He is a member of the California State Assembly representing San Diego County. I'm Brad Pomerance in Sacramento today. It's Local Edition. Yeah, it was fascinating when I spoke with Falk.